guys. My name is John Kiker. I'm president of Medium Giant. So we appreciate everybody being here. Just a quick couple things about Medium Giant, actually the building that we're standing in, because I'm a history buff, so I always like these things. This is actually the original Dallas Public Library that you're standing in right now. That was actually mothballed for several decades. And so when the Beulah Corporation moved over here, there was a lot of restorative work to be done. But when you were in the lobby, you might have noticed a lot of bookshelves. There's a lot of original design elements that are in this building. So this building actually houses the Dallas News Corporation, which is comprised of two groups. Number one, the Dallas Morning News, so the newsroom, the first floor, the second floor. Medium Giant comprises this floor. We also have an office in Tulsa. So Medium Giant is both a media company and an advertising agency. So on one hand, we manage all the owned and operated properties of the Dallas Morning News. On another hand, we're also a full-service media agency, as you would see all these great agencies in our market. Well, we're right in that mix. So again, really glad to have you here. Really excited about this amazing panel. And I will pass it right back to Deja, who is going to introduce these amazing folks. We're going to talk Michelin. We're going to talk food. We're going to talk travel. This is going to be an awesome panel. So thank you all for making the time to be here. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I am super excited to be here tonight and honored to have this opportunity to speak to you all. I'm actually going to bring up our panelists one by one, then I'm going to introduce them to you all. But guys, when we think about Michelin, when we think about hospitality, food, hotel stays, I mean, what a better city to do this with, right? Dallas is just brimming with opportunity in these spaces. And so I'm super excited that we're having this conversation as marketers, as specialists in these areas. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our crew. I think this is my chair right here. So first, we have Jennifer Walker. Jennifer Walker is the CMO of Visit Dallas. She has served as the Chief Marketing Officer of Visit Dallas since 2021, leading brand marketing and communications to elevate Dallas as a global destination. Listen, snaps for that, right? We are growing. With nearly 30 years of experience in marketing and hospitality, she has held leadership roles at Visit California, Visit Santa Barbara, and Visit Austin. Which one's your favorite? Okay. Fine. Under her leadership, Visit Dallas has evolved its image to reflect a dynamic, inclusive city, and she was named a Dallas 500 honoree by DCEO for her influential work in the region. Let's give her a round of applause. All right, up next we have Lizzy Bakhaus, VP of Strategy for Medium Giant. Lizzy brings 15 years of experience in brand strategy, having worked across CPG and B2B sectors. She specializes in consumer insights, messaging frameworks, and digital strategy. Formerly agency director at the in-house team for Dish, Sling, and Boost Mobile, Lizzy is also trained in research moderation and campaign analysis. At Medium Giant, she leads strategy development to help brands define their identity and drive consumer engagement. I have been on calls with her, and she is a brilliant woman. So let's wrap it up. Up next, we have Mark Thompson, SVP of Visit Dallas. Visit Dallas. Mark is Senior VP of Tourism and Operations at Visit Dallas, where he oversees international marketing, cultural tourism, and strategic initiatives. With over 30 years in the industry and more than a decade at Visit Dallas, Mark is a recognized leader named as HSMAI's Top 25 Extraordinary Minds. A fifth-generation Texan, he holds degrees from Southwestern University and SMU. Pony up. Yeah. All right, next we have Sarah Blaskovich. Come on up. She is a food reporter for the Dallas Morning News. Sarah is a senior reporter for the Dallas Morning News, where she covers the local restaurant scene. She profiles new openings, explores food trends, and interviews chefs and business owners across the DFW area. She also appears weekly on NBC to share updates on the city's dining landscape. And last, but certainly not least, Stephanie Price, Senior Manager of Marketing and E-commerce for Historic Hotels of America. Stephanie leads digital marketing and e-commerce for Historic Hotels of America and Historic Hotels Worldwide, a Texas native with degrees from West Texas A&M and Kent State. She also holds certifications in tourism and hospitality, and she has visited over 30 countries and is active on the National Board of Directors for the AAF. That was cut off. I want you to know I just knew that that's what it said. Okay. All right. All right. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. We can give them one more round of applause. Yes. All right. So we are going to open up tonight's panel, and I'm like talking about the evolving travel landscape and all the things that people want to know. So up first, we're going to start with Jennifer. Multiple studies have shown that experiences are now the most influential part of the travel planning process, and that consumers are increasingly prioritizing their spending on experiences over material possessions. According to Skift, some consumers are saying touristy attractions are lacking authenticity. So with this, and understanding that we need to foster a sense of authenticity, immersion, and locality, why is it important to bring this level of thinking and also fuel some of the considerations for Dallas amongst travelers and consumers?
Thank you. You want to try this one? Yeah, that one works. Well, good evening. Pleasure to be here. As you said, consumers now are looking for authentic experiences more than ever. And as a marketer, I lean into that. I want to lean into those authentic experiences that we can uniquely own versus trying to be something for everyone or offering something for everyone. Because when you end up doing that, you end up standing for nothing. And by and large, foodie experiences are a major motivator when consumers are selecting a destination. In fact, over half of U.S. adults cite culinary offerings as a major motivator when they're selecting their destination of choice. When you think about it, culinary offerings have essentially become an attraction of sorts, which is huge for a destination like Dallas when we don't really have major attractions to speak of or points of interest. It's one of the reasons that we're so excited about being recognized as a Michelin destination. And it's one of the reasons why culinary offerings and experiences are one of our core destination brand pillars.
Awesome. I'm going to open this up to the panel, but when we start to think about Dallas as a destination, we know that the landscape here from Dallas to Fort Worth to Waco, everything looks extraordinarily different. You can have any experience you want here. Why do you feel like Dallas is just emerging as kind of that tourist location and really hotspot?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I think one of the key reasons is because of the depth and impressive nature of our luxury product, which is germane to the conversation about Michelin on a couple of fronts. It's also a really good time to talk about that because, as you can imagine right now in the U.S., consumer confidence is not at its peak. Typically, that has a dramatic impact on leisure travel. One of the groups that is somewhat immune to that is high-income households, high-income households, and you see a lot less impact there. It's also one of the areas that ranks very high with Michelin. That part is not a surprise. Later in the panel, we're going to talk about some misconceptions and stereotypes about Michelin, but in terms of it resonating with high-income households, it's absolutely true. And incidentally, that's also true from a hotel standpoint. Right now, the luxury and upper upscale properties are dramatically increasing from a performance standpoint, and those mid-scale and economy properties are struggling. So it's one of those things that you see. But when you look at a destination like Dallas, from hotel, from restaurant, dining, shopping, the luxury product is very strong.
While I have you, can you talk a little bit about the international landscaping while we're also seeing a lot of international travelers pick Dallas as a location?
Yes, it is an interesting time to be selling international travel inbound to the U.S., as you could imagine. In spite of the consumer confidence, ironically, outbound international travel, so Americans leaving to go other places, is significantly higher than any other segment, including domestic travel. It's tracking about 120% higher than projections. Inbound international is the opposite of that story. It's down around 12 to 20%, depending upon the market you're looking at. There's a lot of involvement with politics in that, as you could imagine. There's a lot to do with exchange rates. Like anything, there's a lot of complexity there. It's exactly in those moments where the depth of our product, particularly in luxury, if we're going to compete globally as a city destination, that type of product is important. And something like Michelin is really important because alignment with a 130-year-old brand speaks, to that depth.
Awesome. I'm going to lob it over to Stephanie, and I want to talk a little bit about the role of just the history of Texas, of Dallas, and how that plays a huge role when we think about Michelin, but also Michelin Key.
Right. So I am a historian just by fun. I don't have a degree in history, but my career has led me to learn a lot of history. And the Michelin Keys and, the Michelin program was all a marketing ploy, right? We all know this, right? This was developed by the Michelin Tire Company. They did that so that people would start driving their cars to these destinations and instance have to buy more tires, right? And so I think that is a lesson for all of us in this room as marketers of what are the unique ways and the authentic ways that we've been talking about that we can market the things that we do, right? Because they could have just created a campaign about tires or tread or speed or any of those things. And instead they thought, wow, we'll put out this travel guide. It'll get people driving in their cars, using their cars more, and they'll have to get more tires. So all a great lesson for all of us to go, how do we think about what we're doing as marketers differently? How do we think about that story that we're telling? And yes, very much play to the authenticity, but that's the authenticity of it, right? We don't buy a car for the tires. We buy a car to get us somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's what Michelin was selling. And I think that's the really unique thing. And I think the Keys program just speaks further to that. For those of you that don't know, the Michelin Keys program is the equivalent of hotels. So it's hotels that are ranked by Michelin, visited, and given these. So you can get 1, 2, or 3 keys. 3 obviously being the best, 1 being still an amazing accomplishment. I think Texas has about 18. Dallas does have Michelin Key ranked ones. So congratulations there, because it's a huge feat for a program that just was launched post-COVID. It's only been around for a couple of years now. And I think travelers, as you mentioned, the luxury travelers very much want that authentic experience. And I think the Michelin and the Michelin Keys programs, the reason they're so successful is they give that. You can't buy a Michelin key. You can't buy a Michelin star. You can't bribe a Michelin star. You shouldn't be able to, right? You have to provide this luxury, authentic, wonderful experience to the consumer, and then it speaks for itself, right? And so I think that really, ties it all together. If you get that Michelin key, it's a badge of honor. And Lizzy and I were talking earlier about the statistics. I was just reading today that hotels with a Michelin restaurant or a James Beard restaurant can charge 8 to 18% more for their hotel nights.
Wow.
So it's bringing up revenue as well.
That's awesome. I think as advertisers, as marketers, we all want to have that type of win, right? We're like, how can we create something based off of an insight that's able to sustain for so long? I'm going to open it up to the panel. Are there any misconceptions? I think you hit the nail on the head with you can't really buy. I won't say really. You can't buy one. You should not be able to buy one. Emily in Paris may have, but you should not be able to. But are there any other misconceptions about Michelin Key, the Michelin Star that, have kind of circulated? Sure.
Yes, Michelin is a corner of my personality now. I feel like I'm the food reporter here, and so I learned a lot in the last year or two about Michelin. It's been around for over 100 years, but a misconception is that Michelin inspectors who are anonymous, and if you have an next door neighbor who might work for the CIA, he or she might actually be a Michelin inspector. These people don't tell anyone what they do, for real. Many of them live in Europe or at least outside of Texas. And so many people from outside of the U.S. came into Texas for this first Michelin Guide. But a misconception for our restaurants was, I think a lot of folks, especially if you've lived in a city like Paris or New York, when you came to Texas and nobody talked about Michelin stars, you might have just thought, well, the restaurants in Dallas aren't good enough. And so that's why we don't have any Michelin stars. You or somebody might have said that 5 years, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. The reality was the very first opportunity to get a star at all was in 2024. And that is because Visit Dallas and several other conventions and visitors bureaus came together with the state of Texas to make a deal with Michelin and convince them that Texas was worth looking at. So I think that is so interesting that it wasn't that our restaurants weren't good enough. It's that Texas was not on the map of Michelin. It's like the first time ever that Texas was not on somebody's map. As a born and bred Texan. But it was so major, in my opinion, for dining in Dallas and in Texas when Michelin agreed to look at our 5 biggest cities. So that only happened last year: Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. And these secretive inspectors would go anywhere they wanted to and eat anywhere they thought was interesting, and then come out with a list on a date that we didn't know till we knew, which was in November of last year. We expect another Michelin Guide in November of this year and another one in 2026. And then we see. Is that right? There's a 3-year term on it, which is also interesting. So, there was one misconception that just Texas restaurants weren't good enough, which is not true. It's just that we weren't being looked at. And then another misconception, which Mark, I'd love if you'd chime in on this, is that Michelin equals extremely fancy food. It is true that a 3-star Michelin restaurant in any city is probably a tasting menu, and it probably costs hundreds of dollars per person. However, Michelin also offers 1 and 2 stars and has something called a bib gourmand, which is for reasonably priced food. It has a green star for restaurants that are environmentally friendly, regardless of if they, charge you a lot of money or not. And so this in 2024, Michelin honored a bunch of barbecue restaurants, which are, barbecue's more expensive than it used to be. We all know that, but everything is more expensive than it used to be, but is not considered to be fancy food or necessarily wildly expensive food. And so when Michelin came to town, it was one of many of my missions to try to explain, first of all, what Michelin meant in a way that people could understand, and then also try to dig at ways that regular people could eat in Michelin-starred restaurants. And so we've written a lot of stories about that, and about the bib gourmand, which is that more reasonably priced Michelin restaurant. You want to talk any more about the misconceptions?
Yeah, just a little bit. And before I do, I will say the work that Sarah and the Morning News have done on behalf of the destination and this Michelin Guide is mind-boggling. I mean, the content that was coming out, the prevalence of it, the positioning of it was really sensational. I mean, candidly, one of the key benefits of this program for us is media coverage. And honestly, it's surpassed that. But a shining star, nationally and internationally, was what Sarah was creating right here in Dallas. And I can confirm it has been a process. I can also confirm you cannot bribe in a Michelin way. So the process, this was the better part of a decade. So about 10 years ago, I was in Paris, met with the editor in their headquarters outside of Paris for Green Guides, which is about destinations. It's not about the dining, although they reference them in there. Very nice, but to Sarah's point, Texas wasn't on their radar. It was not a priority. You can't advertise or market your way into it. I did encourage him, we'd love to just let us show you the city. And if you love it, you love it. And if you don't, then you don't. To his credit, he visited. And then after that, just as with the Red Guide, sent in teams of inspectors to crawl throughout the city. They were very taken with Dallas, particularly our arts and culture community and our arts district. And we ended up with 3 stars, the highest possible. And we've maintained 3 stars for the past 10 years. He was kind enough to introduce us to the head of the New York office where the Red Guide, the dining guide, lives. And, lots of twists and turns. We were this close to having a Dallas guide in 2019, looking for funding in what was going to be our best year ever in 2020. We all know how that went, but actually ended up being a blessing. I mean, it's a cliche to say, but the reality is that coming out of COVID, our budgets and our staff and all of our resources were a fraction of what they were. So we reached out to the 5 largest cities in Texas, as well as Travel Texas, our state tourism office, and said, we've got a real opportunity here that we need to look at, but we've got to look at it collectively. So as you can imagine, twist and turn, and the legal teams of 6 different public, private, tax-funded organizations eventually resulted in this agreement. I think that is where there's also some misconceptions about our role in that. Again, we have an investment in this for a 3-year commitment at least, but it's not buying a single listing. It's not buying an ad. It's not buying anything. All 5 cities agreed to fund at equal levels, knowing that the recognition would likely not be doled out equally. So it was indeed a partnership, and it wasn't. And it's also a process. I mean, it was a long process getting to this, but it's also a long-term win. So Michelin is very conservative in handing out any recognition. The number one thing they hate the most is having to pull a star away from someone or a recommendation or a bib gourmand. So they're very slow to hand those out. We believe that year 2, year 3, and thereafter, we're going to see some really impressive content. And then I'll just wrap up by saying you're exactly right. The biggest misconception about Michelin is that it's just extremely fancy, extremely fussy, extremely expensive, extremely French. And to your point, that can be true, but they realized several years ago that there's a lot of opportunity out there for dining and for culinary, and not everything is a $600 3-star 6-hour 14-course menu. So that's when Bib Gourmand and Green Star and some of the things that Sarah mentioned came on board. So it's been great to see that. It's also part of the reason that you're seeing a greater expansion of Michelin into markets where they have not been. That comes down to product. I mean, candidly, Michelin was very candid with us that, regardless of how much funding you have, if the product is not there, we're not going in. So they're identifying markets that, as Sarah mentioned, had been overlooked in the past. And this was just a creative way to do that.
If there are any Michelin recruiters in the room, I am available. So let's talk a little bit about what this has meant for the Dallas economy, and I think Texas as a whole, right? I think we have recently seen just a boom when it comes to infrastructure as far as business coming here. Now we have this elevated dining, hospitality, everything's just booming. What has Michelin done to kind of impact that, and what does the future of Dallas kind of look like? What are we forecasting? Anybody?
I'll take it from a branding perspective.
Sure.
There we go. Mike would help. One of the exercises that I worked on when I first joined Visit Dallas was to establish a unified destination brand. Our goal at the end of the day is to fuel active consideration of travel to Dallas, whether you're a leisure consumer or a meeting professional. And by and large, whether you're one of the other, there isn't a singular thing that rises to the top when people consider Dallas. We as Dallasites know differently. We know how wonderful the city is. We know what our offerings are. We know what our culinary scene is. But by and large, when people think of Dallas, they think the stereotypical soap opera or barbecue and Tex-Mex, and that's about it. And certainly we have barbecue and Tex-Mex, and good barbecue, might I add, as well as Tex-Mex, margaritas as well. But we're much more than that. To your point, we are elevated. We are sophisticated. And as we look ahead towards these transformative events like FIFA World Cup and welcoming the world to Dallas, allowing us or giving us the ability to be on that global stage and to promote the fact that we are a Michelin destination, we wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. That is invaluable as it relates to being able to tell the Dallas story of today. So from a quantifiable standpoint, we don't have that as yet, but that's something that we track in our advertising effectiveness studies. We look at moving the needle, so to speak, on brand attributes like, are we considered a culinary destination? And that's something that we look forward to continuing to promote in the future.
Awesome. And I know a lot of you all are advertisers in this room, marketers in this room. Can you all talk to us, and maybe Lizzy, take this one, about strategy? We talked about World Cup coming our way. There's a lot of eyes that are going to be on the Dallas market. What are some opportunities for brands, maybe not even in the hospitality space, but to really get in on the conversation around why Dallas is a place to be?
Yeah, for sure. I think I can speak about that in maybe 3 different facets. I'd say first and foremost, we're seeing an incredible rise in influencer attractiveness towards the tourism space. I was looking at some interesting stats. I'm totally the stat person. I'm always bringing stats to our discussions. But we've seen this crazy 400% increase in TikTok travel influencer content in like 2 years. When we look at about 7 years ago, the influencer space was a $1.7 billion space. Today, it's $24 billion. So that growth in seven years can largely be attributed to the travel space. I think that a lot of times we think of how we're going to post about ourselves in a very organic way on our social media content, and focusing there as a brand might not be the space where you can really win. I think paid search and I think paid social and paid influencer content is really a great place to be. I think people are looking for those experiences, and we're also seeing one of the sharpest changes in how quickly people are willing to book travel and book experiences, mostly because we have this kind of post-COVID, we can work from anywhere mindset. And I think that's a big factor. But I think people are willing to make a leap of faith simply on a reel that they saw. They're willing to book a vacation or say, I want to have that experience. I'll book a weekend out of that. So I think influencer content is a huge factor. I think engaging storytelling, secondarily, engaging storytelling in the experiences that you're building. We can all talk about storytelling. There's so much storytelling in the food space, but I think oftentimes we focus on the what or the where that we're selling or we're eating. But if we deliver more information about the why this is on the menu, why this experience has been created, I think it'll make a huge impact for brands, especially in this space, especially in Dallas, in a city that has so much heritage, so much culture. I think telling more of that why will really help us win more. And then third, I would say there's a lot of, you had mentioned earlier, 1 in 2 people make a plan for a weekend or a trip based on a restaurant or a dish. That means that, it's a staggering statistic to me, really, that half the people that are traveling are basing it on either a singular or a range of food experiences. And so I think hotels, we were talking earlier actually about how there's these historic hotels that have these amazing experiences and these amazing offerings. But the food is often what people are drawn to first. And so I think leading with that and really owning the culture behind the food. When you guys travel to places in Europe, you start to notice that food in Greece, if you've ever been there, you kind of know what Greek cuisine is like. You have olives and cucumbers and tomatoes, and you start to think, hey, like those foods just taste great together. But when you're in that space, you learn that it's actually the soil content makes it possible for all of those things to grow really well together. So it's actually the origin of how those foods came together and were actually grown together to make that feasible and possible, not the other way, that it was built around taste or flavor. It was built around culture and the heritage and the way that a community of people lived and grew up and how they functionally operated. And so I think there's a lot of that here too, around why Texas has the food it does, but particularly Dallas. And you mentioned margaritas jokingly, but really there's a lot of storytelling behind why margaritas are such a big thing here. And I think leading with that or talking about that can really move the needle. So
Absolutely. I was actually going to pass it your way. Did you want to echo?
No, I do want to echo that. And sorry for not talking about Dallas, but I do have a great story about a hotel in Chicago. So the brownie was actually invented at a historic hotel in Chicago. If you didn't know that it was for the World's Fair. And so I just want to echo that telling that story is the reason, 75% of the people visit that hotel. And that's not a hard statistic, but is to have brownie, because that was the very first place a brownie was invented for the World's Fair and packaged. And it was all for the hotel owner's wife who wanted to host a luncheon at the World's Fair and needed a portable dessert that people could take with her. So it's the story behind it, right? It's not just a brownie. It's not just a margarita. It's never just a margarita, let's be honest. But it's not that, right? It's the story behind it. And it's that storytelling that really propels us forward. And I think that I do see, with FIFA and things coming up, there are a lot of brands that are missing the history of story.
And I think that the more that we find that in brands and the more that we're able to share why we do the things we do, like Lizzy was saying, that's where the power comes, right? We don't just have a brownie because somebody's like, I'll throw chocolate in a baking dish and see what happens, right? Everything does have a reason behind it. And when we share that and connect with the consumers like that, I think they have much more of affinity for who we are and what we do, and they keep coming back for more.
Absolutely. Let's talk, while you have the mic,
Okay.
a little bit more about Michelin Key. So we know that it is upon us. It is the newest advent of
Right.
Michelin opportunities. Is it as rigorous? Like, what is that process like to get a Michelin Key? Does that history play a role in some of the criteria?
The criteria I think is just as rigorous as Sarah mentioned. It is very much an anonymous. It's a new program for them, right? It just came out in 2024, and they did look all across, the United States, which was nice. We do have several in Texas. But I think it's just as rigorous. It's just as anonymous. It's focusing on obviously more than just the food, but that does play into it. The restaurant experience at a hotel, the stay, everything down to the linens, right? And the whole vibe of a place. I really liked what you mentioned about restaurants, though, that granted, most of your 3 keys are going to be your luxury, high-end, I'm staying in a 5-star property, but there are others that are for sustainability, and there are others that aren't necessarily going to cost you your, the cost of your car to go visit, right? So it is nice that Michelin does look at it as a well-rounded program, and I think we're going to continue to see the keys be impactful. I think right now it's budding, and a lot of people probably don't know about it. I mean, show of hands, did you guys know about Michelin keys before you came in here? Couple, but not many, right? I'm seeing a lot of no's. So I think that it hasn't made an impact quite yet, but I think it's going to start. Because as we talked about, people see a reel on Instagram and they book it for that reason, right? And I think hotels are absolutely the same, right? You see that view off of that balcony and you want to sit there and you want to have your morning coffee, with the Eiffel Tower in the back, right? I mean, we all want it. Hotel Regina Louvre, by the way. But you want it, right? So, and I think that's the Michelin Keys is going to continue to propel that forward, but I don't think it's done it quite yet. I'll be honest. It's just budding and new, and I think people have to learn about it first.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm going to open the floor up. Any questions from you all? Jimmy.
Thank you for talking about the accessibility between not just the hyper wealthy households that afford it, kind of different, stratification of offerings that Michelin has. I'm just so curious. We'll probably never know, but did they go through the suburbs and like North Dallas, South Dallas? How many taqueries did they go to? I am so curious where their teams all went, and if I'm sure there's a way they systematically break it down. Long story short, was it just Dallas or was it all around it?
Yeah, it was predominantly in those 5 cities that were part of the agreement with Michelin, defined by city borders for the most part. Now, if you look at the Michelin outcomes of 2024, there's a couple in different parts of the state that were outside of those metro areas that Michelin felt like really warranted some attention and to call those out. At the same time, it is not yet a statewide program where any restaurant in any corner of the state might be included. So to Sarah's earlier point, with El Paso not having anything represented Michelin doesn't mean there's not great dining there, just means they're not part of that process. By and large, and it's a handful of restaurants that were included that weren't in those 5 metro areas, but they were near them. So it was one of those things that actually, it's a great question because there was a lot of conversation about that, a lot of politics involved, as you could imagine, particularly with the state as a key funding partner. We work closely with the state and with those 5 cities in international initiatives. So I think were it not for those relationships and that history, we would have had a real challenge. Our hope is that this expands to a statewide program in which any restaurant in any city, town, village could be included and discovered.
I have one thing to add to that. Is that okay? Whether Michelin inspectors are looking in Plano versus Dallas, the company being in Texas's major cities has changed the dining scene in just a year, and we've watched it happen and reported on it. So another interesting thing that's happening is that chefs that never would have moved to Dallas or to Austin or to any part of Texas, chefs that never would have moved to Denton to open a world-class Italian restaurant, are making those decisions because of stuff like this. I mean, you want to be around high achievers, and chefs feel that too. And so, perfect example, there's a family from the Denton area. They were born in Korea. They moved to Denton when they were teenagers. The brother became a chef and moved to New York City and opened a Korean Japanese restaurant there. It got Bib Gourmands in New York City from 2017 to 2023. They decided once Michelin was here to open that same restaurant here, but to elevate it and turn it into a tasting menu restaurant. And now both brothers co-own this restaurant, and the guy who lived in New York City lives in a suburb of Dallas, very specifically and only because Michelin is here. And he said in a quote, and nobody says this, he said, quote, "I want a Michelin star." Most chefs are like, oh, it would be nice, or something. Most of them will not. And I mean, a journalist can ask, the first thing I'll ask you is like, how old are you? How much money do you make? How long have you had that job? I can ask anybody anything they want all the time. That's what journalists get to do. And so these guys moved here just so that they could be part of Michelin, and yet nobody will say they want a Michelin star, but he does. So just another thing is, like, regardless of where they're looking, we are seeing a dramatic change in culinary prowess, in interesting cuisine, because Michelin is here.
I want to take. Can I add just to that? Take this mic, and I'm gonna.
Yeah, I will say that's actually one of the key benefits and strategies and priorities of the reason that we wanted to be part of Michelin. Was because of that narrative and that conversation with that question. Yeah. And it's actually another great example. Tatsu, which received a 1 star from Michelin, specifically opened in Dallas on the rumor that Michelin was coming and the hope that there'd be a lens put on them for that reason. To Sarah's point, it is elevating experiences throughout. I mean, a lot of course, our priority was media and content and driving visitation. But what it's doing to the product and tasting menus that you're seeing come up and the service levels of restaurants and just having something to strive for is another improvement to that product and that process above and beyond the media coverage and the value there.
Do we know if any of the Michelin restaurants will be part of Restaurant Week, which comes up in August? Ooh. Wow.
I don't know whether Michelin recommended or Michelin starred restaurants will be part of Restaurant Week. I do know that Restaurant Week reaches out to anybody, who wants to have a fine experience in August. Restaurant Week, if anybody doesn't know, it's not a week, despite the name. It's a couple of weeks. And you get a fixed menu at some of Dallas's finest restaurants for a fixed price. And then I think it's 20% goes to either the North Texas Food Bank, if it's a Dallas area restaurant, or Lena Pope Home, if it's a Fort Worth area restaurant. It's a really nice fundraiser, and it's a great way to go try a restaurant if you hadn't spent to go there yet, or maybe hadn't tried their tasting menus. Something interesting about a Michelin level restaurant is some of them don't want to play that game. A little bit of a sassy thing, yeah. And so I don't know how much crossover there is. We should also point out there's just one Michelin starred restaurant in Dallas proper, and that's Tatsu. There are lots of other accolades Michelin gave, but stars specifically, we have no 2 or 3 star restaurants in the state of Texas yet, and we have just one in Dallas, and that's Tatsu.
Hey, a couple of questions. One for Jennifer. How did you stack us to brand us to get that culinary angle of Texas and Dallas, because we are so diverse, and I feel like it would be very hard for me to categorize our cuisine as why you would want to come and visit. It's not just Tex-Mex. It's not just, I feel like it's Italian, it's Thai. And then global. Before I forget, the second question I have is for Sarah, which is, what is the emerging thing that we're going to be known for outside of Tex-Mex and margaritas?
Sure. So to answer your first question, I would say by starting with extensive research, nearly 2 years worth. We have our agency partners in the room with us today, and I know that they can attest to that. but consulting not only with Dallas residents, because a Dallas resident and their view of Dallas is very, very different than that of a visitor, and very different from somebody who's coming from a drive market versus an opportunity market versus an international market. So ensuring that wherever we landed with the destination brand would resonate, both with residents and visitors, was critically important. We have 5 experience pillars, but one of the things that rose to the top when people were unaided being asked about what do you think of when you think of Dallas was our creative culinary influence. So yes, it is the food, but it is elevated. It is also the ambiance, for example, of some of our restaurants that I believe you cannot find anywhere else. It's sophisticated. It's reflective of an emerging global city and a cosmopolitan destination. So I think that that came through loud and clear and very consistently.
The next trend in food, this is a really hard thing. I have an answer for you. My real answer is I'm not really sure. I have a bunch of guesses, but one that comes to mind is if you think through the Michelin lens, one of the pillars of Michelin is that the chef puts him or herself on the plate. So whoever you are, and there's no wrong answer there, we want to know a little about you by eating the food or the many courses that you're going to serve. So I think my answer would be that we are seeing many high-end restaurants that are coming to Dallas that are very specifically about the person opening them. So instead of saying this is a French restaurant because we like French food or because we think fancy people like French food, this is a French restaurant because the chef is from France. You know, and so we in fact have one of those in the quad. We used to call it the quadrangle. Everybody remember the quadrangle? In our younger years, it's now called the quad, and it has gotten cooler. And there's 5 freestanding restaurants, and one of them will be called Mamani, and it is a French chef who has worked in the United States for years, but born and raised in France. His closest family member, or so I hear, was his Italian grandmother. So this will be what they're calling a European tasting menu that will be equal parts French and Italian. Sounds interesting. I have no idea what dishes are going to be on the menu, and they haven't told me yet. But I think that's very specifically about that guy. The tasting menu that I mentioned from the chef who says he wants a Michelin star, they're a Korean family. He came up learning Japanese cuisine. The restaurant is a fusion of Korean and Japanese in a place like I have never seen. That place is called Domo Domo. It also happens to be in the quad, this is not an ad for the quad. They've just done a really good job finding people. So I think my answer is that we're actually interested in where people are from. And it reminds me of a really old historical story about El Phoenix, which will make you laugh if you haven't heard it. El Phoenix is Dallas-Fort Worth's oldest restaurant. It's 107 years old. Does that seem right, guys? And it was owned for most of its lifetime by a Mexican family making food for non-Mexican guests. Oysters, Rockefeller, spaghetti. That was on the original menu at El Phoenix. And they were making tacos and enchiladas or whatever in the back as like family meal for the cooks. And one of the regulars said, "What are you guys eating? I want that." And this family, as the story goes, said, "I didn't think you wanted my food. I was trying to make food for you." And the guest said, no, I want to know what you like to eat, and I want to try that. Of course, the El Phoenix we know today is famous for its cheese enchiladas and chili con carne and margaritas. And that's what we want. That's what we always wanted from the El Phoenix owners, I think. But it took too long to get there. So yeah, my answer is we want people's heritage. We want to learn something about where somebody is from. And we're seeing that with Ethiopian Texas barbecue. We're seeing that with Pakistani barbecue. 2 restaurants that were on Texas Monthly's top 50 list, which was announced today. Both of those are in DFW. One is Sabah Barbecue from a Pakistani American guy that's in Fort Worth. And Ethiopian barbecue got a honorable mention. It's Smoke and Ash in Arlington. Those are 2 kinds of Texas style barbecue that we really haven't talked about a lot. And it's really cool.
Cool. And thought on
Yeah, please. I love what you said. I have a separate thought, but I love what you said about heritage food. I think that's such an interesting way to characterize the amazing mishmash of offerings that the city has and the stories behind them. I have something that answers your question, Natalie, on more of a national level that I think is a consideration for the Dallas market to consider as they move into being more recognized and known for all of the things that it has to bring to the table, literally. So we're actually I mentioned this when we were talking about kind of the things that are changing amongst us, and we're actually at an all-time historic 25-year low on how much people are drinking alcohol. And I think what's so interesting about that is we're seeing this change in how people are consuming alcohol, but people are going out to dinner more than ever. There's less alcohol consumed in some cases on premise, but not always. But people are trying more dishes at a restaurant than they have in the past. And I read this Forrester study that was talking about how while people are doing less drinking, they're also more health conscious and more aware of ingredients. People are more interested and aware of the ingredients than they ever have been. And I think there's something very interesting about what luxury used to be. And I think I love what you said about this being a place of ambiance and experience. And there's a luxurious feel to what the Dallas food scene has to offer. I think luxury used to be rich, right? And heavy and powerful and filling. And I think luxury in the food space from what I've seen and what I've read seems like it's transitioning into this space of being able to do more with less. And so I think there's this conscientiousness of ingredients and awareness of what we're putting into our bodies. And the chefs that are really blowing us away are the ones that are doing more with less rather than the inverse. And so I think that might be maybe not a Dallas specific trend, but more of a national trend to consider. So
Awesome. Any other questions? Yes.
So as far as trends, I was wondering something that I feel like I've been seeing more and more is this idea of like, as far as experiential dining, is this supper club, the rise of the supper club. Like there's the Oxford Rose is coming. The Rayleigh Underground opened a while ago, but it's a kind of like this dinner and a show. You hang out. At Evelyn, you go dancing after you have dinner. And is that something that we think we're going to see more of, or is that just a flash in the pan going to kind of fizzle out? Because I can see both sides, right? Like why pay to Uber all around town or drive from place to place, just make your night out your night out. But at the same time, I feel like people, while we like to talk about being connected, no one likes to sit at like a group table. Like people, they like to, I would love that. And then they don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to, but is that something that maybe it does have legs or could be like something in the future that we see?
Yes, sir.
I do think it has legs, and you gave many good examples. Another would be Delilah opening in the design district. There is a Delilah in several other cities, LA and Vegas are too. And I went to the one in Vegas, I say for research, but we actually just spent like so much money on food because it's so expensive. But there were women in gold floor-length gowns and feather fascinators, like dancing on a single pedestal in the corner, and not in a inappropriate way. Just like they were like art or something. And then there was like a whole big band playing cover songs on the stage in the middle of this extremely fancy dinner. And they're going to do that in Dallas. And there will be, I think there's several rooms in Delilah. And it's just one of these more like places where you can go they will take all your money and then some, and you don't have to go anywhere else. I do think that those things will stick around. And it makes me think of something that every single one of you have said, which is like, we do want to experience things, and then we want to tell people that we did it. And if you think about all the places you suggested, what a fantastic Instagram video. And so I think we're like living inside of those aspirations. And the restaurants the big money restaurants that we're seeing built are partly restaurant deals, but they're huge real estate deals, right? So like if you build a $90 million building and you're going to put a bunch of restaurants in the bottom, they better stick around to be pretty impressive. And it's going to cost a lot of people's money to put all those things in. And so this is a huge development idea in the design district in one place, but there's lots all over, where it has to be wow. It's new. It has to be wow. And so I like it. I mean, I like the idea of being entertained. I also think the food is enough. I can also just sit at the group chat at the table with the group and talk. But I think you're right that we will see more of it. If you swing all the way on the other side, pickleball bars. There's a surf bar that I pass on the way home in Deep Ellum. We do want to be entertained, I think, as we're doing things, even if it's doing something like taking your girlfriends to play pickleball and drinking vodka sodas while you do it. Yeah, it's a great trend.
Well, I think it's to your point. It's being all entertained in one space, right? The hotels that can do that, the complexes, if we can park once and do it, especially in a state like Texas where driving is everything, we were just talking about how there's not a lot of public transportation here, let's be honest. So if you can park once and have a complex that's going to cater for your whole night and make it an experience and something that you can Instagram about, hotels are the same way, right? If I don't have to walk out of the resort, but it caters to everything, the Kalaharis of the world, the others like that, they're winning right now, is because they bring the experience, they bring the luxury and the good stuff, and you don't have to leave. So
I think we got one more. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, with this being the first go around with Michelin and, them having to learn the market and understand the landscape and identify restaurants with potential. Sarah, were you surprised that Tatsu was the only one that got a star?
I had 3 restaurants on the list for a 1-star. I believe I might have even written paragraphs in case they did win so that we were ready. So yes, I was surprised. Tatsu was on my list. I thought there would be 1 or 2 more Japanese omakase restaurants that were on that list. Perhaps Shoyo, which is a favorite. It's on Greenville. And then I thought Lucia, an Italian restaurant in the Bishop Arts District, was a shoe-in for a star. And they got a Bib Gourmand, which is Michelin says that you should be able to spend $50 or less on 3 courses of food, a starter, a next course, and either a glass of wine or a dessert. So 3 courses a little, but I can't figure out how to spend $50 a person at Lucia. It's a wonderful restaurant. It is not inexpensive, and the sweet owners of it are also thankful for the Michelin award, but are like, I think they put us in the wrong bucket. So I thought Michelin was going to be a 1-star as well. And then I had a couple of outliers. It is really interesting that no steakhouses, none of these like really traditional steakhouses, like Mark, if somebody comes to Dallas and they're like, where should we eat? You probably feel out what kind of person they are. But some of those people do want to go to Nick and Sam's. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with Nick and Sam's because you're going to see a couple retired Cowboys players there, maybe a celebrity. And the waiter's going to tell a great story about the famous people who were in yesterday. But none of those places were honored by Michelin. And I thought they might. And they didn't go for it.
That's actually, I will say that's one of my favorite things about Michelin is the amount and the ability to have content year round. And Sarah was the queen of this as we were teasing with the announcement last summer and then doing the first launch in November. But it's all those conversations and that interest and that engagement of why did you miss this and how dare this not be included and why is this one there and why is it not? We were joking earlier, Texas Monthly did a fantastic job of that today while they were releasing their barbecue rankings, which of course in Texas are a lot of attention is paid to that, lots of opinions about what should be on there and what should not. But every single time those folks are weighing in, it's fantastic coverage and extensive engagement to that end. And we've heard a lot about Instagram and showing, and Lizzy, I know you referenced Reels. I think when we talk about the misconceptions about Michelin, aside from the experience and the types of restaurants, it's about who it resonates with. And as an audience of marketers and advertisers, there's some really interesting things about Michelin. For example, the #1 age group for which it resonates in terms of I'm picking a destination based on what I see in Michelin is millennials. Followed by Gen Z, followed by Gen X and Boomer after that. So, when you're talking about engaging with content, it's not going to be in your traditional glossy coffee table type approach. And same thing from a demographic standpoint. More than twice the number of Black households prioritize Michelin dining on a leisure destination than white households do. And actually, white households are the lowest numbers. So roughly 40% of Black households, 29 for Hispanic, 27 for Asian. And then similar numbers as you look to those distinctions between the generations as well. So the assumptions of who's using Michelin, who's making those decisions, who it resonates with and how you reach them is really different from the reality. And I think it's largely because of what you've all referenced is that, a Michelin experience, a good dining experience, certainly it's great to enjoy it in the moment, but what fun of it is it if no one sees you doing it and you haven't chronicled that about so many other things. And that outside of the selection process, I think is one of the biggest misconceptions about Michelin and how much it's changing over time. I will say to that end, we all grit our teeth about, gosh, I wish first year had done this or done that. Michelin has been very, honest from the forefront about how conservative they are. A destination does not open with a 2-star restaurant. I mean, if a restaurant that's going to be 2 or 3 star will start as a 1 or start as a recommendation, this is a long-term play for us and some really exciting things ahead. And there will continue to be that same teeth gnashing about, oh my gosh, I thought this was going to be the year that this was included or that you covered this. And there'll be that continued engagement.
Can we talk a little bit about the Michelin effects? And while there may only be one, I think about the first time I got to stay at the Four Seasons, and now everything is like, is this Four Seasons, worthy? That everywhere I go, right? And similar to Michelin, I mean, restaurants. And so can we talk a little bit about what that means for restaurants that may be tertiary to a Michelin restaurant, or even hotels that, you get that first experience and now you're always seeking that?
One thing that we haven't talked about yet that I think is related to this is so many people are moving to Dallas Fort Worth. And I talked to an economist about this for a 5-year COVID story. And I asked her how restaurants were going to keep up with that. And she said something that is very simple and I should have learned in college. And she said, obviously, when more people move here, we have to have a lot more restaurants of all kinds. So we will have these higher level Michelin style places, but Michelin also recommended barbecue places, So what I'll say is that as we see a massive influx of people moving to Dallas Fort Worth, we all have friends from a different state who moved here for one of the major headquarters that relocated to Dallas, probably because they talked to you guys about moving here. With that comes new restaurants of every level. All of those new people eat fast food and have date nights and have to take their kids for burgers and everything. And so we are seeing a healthy mix of all of that, which feels like partly Michelin related, but also just related to all the people moving to Dallas Fort Worth. Does anybody have good stats on that? The number of people moving here?
I do. I was waiting just in case it came up. And, yep, no problem. I was Googling just in case. It's dropped a bit after COVID, so it's about 1,000 to 3,000 new residents in Texas daily. Dallas County added roughly 46,000 new residents last year, so it's thought between 600 or so moved to DFW daily or weekly.
Wow.
A lot of people.
It's a lot of people, and not to mention, when we rise up together, it's better for all of us. And just to kind of go back to everything you've been saying, if you take an authentic approach, it seems to be a trend or a through line between good ads and good business practices that people respond to it. So just thanks for everything you've been doing to help bring this to Texas in general. Sorry, more of a
Well, we're
comment.
such a media savvy society, right? I mean, my 4-year-old can work her iPad better than I can work my cell phone. Let's be real honest with ourselves, right? She has a little kid's one, it's locked. But some of you are looking like, what? But let's be very honest, we're a media savvy society, right? And so consumers can see through the crap, right? They can see through it very quickly. So if we're not delivering, if we're putting out these beautiful ads and putting all this creative behind it and these wonderful, beautiful things, and the experience doesn't live up to it, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's to your point. Once you get the taste of that historic hotel that's really cool and you're on the 15th, the 19th floor of the Statler staring out at the Dallas skyline, sitting next to their pool on your laptop having a glass of rosé. Not that I did that a few minutes ago, but I think that you as a consumer have a tendency to seek out those experiences more, right? I mean, that's what we're all talking about here. That was the point of bringing Michelin here, I'm sure. It's we want people to seek out Dallas as their destination. And I think that we're in such a time, as you mentioned, the economy is shifting, things are changing, that we're all being very sacred with our dollars. And so a lot of people are going, well, I could take 2 or 3 vacations, or I could take that one big one and save it for that and really have the experience in the Instagram reels and the things I want to show everybody back home, rather than going and staying somewhere that's probably, not gonna really fulfill that idea of a vacation, right? Because we're so pressed for time as a society. We're pressed for money a little bit right now with the things going on. The little R might be headed our way. And so I think that's the Michelin effect, right? That's the keys, that's the star, that's the authenticity, that's the experience that we can provide as a hospitality group, is that we're going to see the return better on those things as opposed to, people just, staying wherever or eating wherever, right?
Absolutely. I think you guys have all talked about just the opportunities that exist here. You gave a lovely statistic about African American households over-indexing in luxury opportunities, especially when it comes to dining. When we think about Texas, historically, representation hasn't always been our strong suit. But I think as the landscape evolves, as advertisers and marketers, I think it's important for everyone to see themselves here. Do you think we're doing a good job of that, especially when it comes to, as we're talking about these restaurants and hotel experiences, are we saying, hey, come on, everybody, because Texas has something for everybody? Y'all like my accent?
Mark, you guys at Visit Dallas are doing a great job of that, I think. Like, it's just somebody from the outside who's watched what you guys have done at Visit Dallas. Jennifer, with your branding, you are saying, everybody, y'all come on, right? Like, you're being very smart and strategic about that. So I think, kudos to you guys. So that question, but I see it as somebody who visits Dallas all the time. So.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to answer that, and definitely want Jennifer to weigh in as well. I would say I think there are areas in which we collectively are doing that well. I think you look at progressive cities like Dallas, Austin, I mean, the really the 5 largest cities that we worked with. You see that by and large, not just in culinary, what we're talking about, but just in general. At the state level, we've got a very different narrative going on right now, and even federally. I think, from a branding and a positioning standpoint, it's one of the biggest obstacles that we have as a destination. The amount of clients and visitors who reach out to us wondering if they'll be safe here. And that comes from a variety of perspectives. But I will tell you, the farther you get away from Dallas and from Texas, those stereotypes get really strong. And the number of them gets distilled down to a couple of things. And guns are usually the first 3 things on the list, which, really, it's something that we have to overcome. I think in terms of, from the brand pillars that Jennifer and her team have identified, the diversity of our community is one of those, as is culinary. So, 2 of the 5 are already overlapping in this regard. No.
I think you summed it up pretty well, Mark. I think talking about stereotypes, when people think of Dallas, they don't realize, for example, that we have the 6th largest LGBTQ plus community in Texas. Unfortunately, we get lumped together with the rest of the state. They don't realize that we have one of the largest black tie fundraising events for LGBTQ plus rights. They don't realize that we have more rainbow crosswalks than anywhere else in the country, or we are at the forefront of legalizing gay marriage. And that's huge. And I will also say that there are some things that marketing will not solve. There are times when we will not take a marketing stance to respond to something. That is just not the way I think to go about things. One other thing I do want to mention as it relates to the Michelin effect, and a positive aspect of this, is that by and large, consumers are relying on peers, their friends and family for recommendations versus glossy kinds of ads, right? They don't want to be sold to necessarily. So what we are excited about is leveraging that momentum, and really having that narrative be created by people that are experiencing the destination, because that's what we need them to do, is to talk about reasons why they want to come to visit Dallas. We really haven't sparked, I would say, that conversation in a significant way like we are doing now.
That's awesome. All right, I'm going to do one more question for you guys. When we think about the Metroplex as a whole, even extending as far as Frisco, where I live, very far from here. Fort Worth. I mean, the DFW area as a whole is so expansive. I've also lived in New York City. I moved here from New York City. And what I do know is that it is so complicated to get a dinner reservation, a hotel stay, depending on some, times of the year. Can we talk about Dallas landscape and how I really feel like that barrier to access may be a little less complex than it is in some larger cities, but validate me, please. Sorry.
Yeah, I will definitely say that is true, and how we position ourselves internationally, for example. The product, of course, we talk about, but also, I mean, the value, the price point, the access, all those things that we know and take for granted. But boy, you can have a week-long experience in Dallas for what you can on the coasts. And it's not to say that it's less of an experience, just a nature of geography and market demand. So from our standpoint, we position that as very approachable and accessible luxury. Coming back to that, we've heard a lot about authenticity and the brand and people experiencing things. Internationally, one of the things, you talk about stereotypes and perceptions, you get 500 or more miles away from Dallas, and certainly 5,000 or 10,000 miles away. And the brand equity of Western just will not go away. It's just cowboy, cowboy, cowboy. And, from a marketing standpoint, it's an enviable, alignment in terms of what folks think of when they think of the state. There's no question people know about Texas and they've heard of Dallas. We're not an unknown. But the reality is that, internationally, that question becomes, what am I going to experience when I get there? Because as you all know, if you think you're stepping off the plane and seeing horses and cowboy hats and oil wells and all those things that are expected. That's right. You've been diverted. But it's one reason why these authentic experiences and why something like Michelin is so important, because it is there. It is something that can be experienced, and it's not just this image in the clouds.
Oh, got one more? Yes.
I'm gonna put three of you on the spot: Jennifer, Mark, and Sarah. What's your hidden gem in Dallas?
Oh.
What should we go to spot? Doesn't have to have a Michelin star, doesn't have to have a price tag, but you guys have probably had access and experiences that are unique. So what is your, when people come to town now, this is what you want to share with them?
Stop. Coming.
Yeah, I'm on the first one.
Can I? I'm taking notes. I know. I'm like, pulls out phone.
I got a little high and a little low, so neither are really hidden, but they're favorites of mine. So the best burger in Dallas is from the back seat of your car at Keller's, the drive-in place that's been there. There are three of them, but the one you should go to is on Northwest Highway in East Dallas, and it's been there, I believe, since 1950. And they take credit cards now, but they didn't. It was cash only until like a few years ago. And I think that the number 5, which is a double with a poppy seed bun, is perfect. And they will bring you a beer in your vehicle and you can drink it in your car. I should write a news story about how that is possible. I don't know how that's legal, but they will, you can drink the whole beer in your car. Just the car's off and then you can, okay, wait. And then I thought immediately to cocktails. Like if people are coming in from out of town, I want to impress them with cocktails. Bar Colette is a favorite right now. It's in West Village. West Village is going through a thing. When Me Casino left a couple of years ago, there's been a change in West Village. It used to be really kind of like a hot spot in Uptown. Bar Colette moved in kind of in the middle of all that, and they serve some of the most inspired cocktails I've ever seen in Dallas. And one of the really cool things about it is they serve smaller in size cocktails. So like if you wanted to try a little dirty martini, it's just like in a small cup, which is darling. Or they will do like lower proof cocktails. So you love a cocktail, but you can't drink 4 cocktails in 2 hours and then go home on a Tuesday night. You can drink a cocktail-like thing with a little less alcohol in it. Bar Colette comes from the people who are opening Mamani in the Quad, and they are bringing chefs in to Texas people who will move here to work at their restaurants and bars, and they're doing things that feel very New York and LA to me, and that's a good thing. Want to pick your favorites?
That's almost an impossible question to answer, but I will go with I like the elevated experiences with some of the incredible ambiance that we have at our restaurants. I think Town Hearth, by and large for me, the Monarch, Mr. Charles, Rye. There's so many wonderful experiences to have here. That's what makes our job fun, is that we continue to get to tell all the fun stories and try them while we're at it.
Yeah, and I'll take a similar high-low approach, or at least a very different answer in terms of what they are to each other. One of those, I know it's not ever going to be on Michelin, but there's a neighborhood restaurant very near White Rock called El Vecino, which is family-owned and operated. It's a place I love to take out-of-town visitors because you've got very traditional Tex-Mex, but very high quality. And you've also got some more elevated menu items as well. The ambiance, the service, I mean, it's a real standout, not because it's anything, ultra fussy by any means, but it's a great experience. And then another one, candidly, just down the street that I love is a place called the Mitchell. That has, a European influence in a really cool space that has a lounge effect to it, but also a lot of live performances. The last time I was there, they had open mic comedy, which was so not what I expected, in a restaurant with a French-inspired menu. But I mean, honestly, it just worked. It was so quirky and unique, and that mashup was so impressive. And that is one thing that we're seeing from a trend standpoint with food and with Michelin. Those fusions continue. And you were talking about, French and Italian and what that might look like. That sort of thing, I think, really resonates because, again, it's authentic, it's unique, it's not something you experience on every corner.
I'm going to add one more, and this is really cheesy and it's dumb, but it's talking about authentic experiences. Super campy, but Mariano's Hacienda, because it is the home of the original frozen margarita machine. And it's something that we tout, that we promote. We invented something at Visit Dallas called the Margarita Mile. And hands down, when we do focus groups, we ask consumers what was the most compelling or interesting thing that you heard here today, and everybody loses their mind at the Margarita Mile. They're like, oh my God, I would visit Dallas tomorrow. If I had known about that, let me try that. So super campy, but super fun, and there's history to it.
It's not really an interesting question, but where is the quad?
Oh, where's the quad?
The quad is in Uptown, so a few miles from here. It is anchored by Theater 3, which has been there for like decades, and then pretty much everything around it has changed. But if you're at the American Airlines Center and the Katy Trail ends there, if you were to take the Katy Trail, which is this beautiful walking path up maybe a mile or so, you would be close to the quad in Uptown Dallas. Yeah. Uptown is a very vibrant neighborhood. There's a lot of apartment buildings where a lot of younger folks live, lots of restaurants and bars, and it's kind of in the middle of all that. But it's always interesting to see a development kind of change inside of a neighborhood because they had to bulldoze buildings in order to make these 5 freestanding restaurants happen. And so in Dallas, we do that. So they created 5 new restaurants out of, what was something else. And the reinvention of that's very interesting to me.
Is Dream Cafe still there? Or date back in date?
Is Dream Cafe still there? They moved over to McKinney Avenue in Uptown, but they are walking distance. But they did get kicked out of their 30-some-odd-year-old home. There was a news story about that.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Thank you all so much for participating in this panel as well. I have to say, Dallas is, in my opinion, booming right now from a cultural renaissance when it comes to just everything, arts, food, hospitality. We are just, you can just tell we're on the forefront of something really special here. And so thank you so much for the work that you do, for really pouring into this landscape of Dallas, but also Texas as a whole. And yeah, we can give them a round of applause.